Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome to Chapter 1, Book Reviews and Fun All Around. My name is Frank Perrine.
Cody Decker.
And today we're going to be going over
John dies at the end. And
yes.
This is, for people who don't know, Frank has never managed to say the title right.
I never have.
I have heard when Jonathan goes dead, when...
Yeah. There's certain things that I just can't wrap my head around for some reason. That and the word apocalypse.
Yeah. Oh, you got it. That was the closest
That's
you got
the
it.
closest
Yeah.
I've ever gotten it. But maybe it's just my head. I don't know.
Yeah.
But
This is a book by David Wong and narrated by Stephen R. Thorne.
yeah.
I think he did a good job capturing that sarcasm.
He did good. I'll be honest. First time I heard it, I was just like, okay, it was all over the place for me. And sometimes I listen to it again, and I've heard it 3 times. But the second time was enjoyable. Third time was great.
Yeah, you do that a lot. You
do that a lot.
You're like, I had to give it a third chance. I had to give it a fourth chance.
I do.
I mean, nothing can be if you hate something, you must really hate it because you give everything.
I did, yeah, because I'm thinking I'm missing something, and I'm like, I know this is gonna sound weird, but I feel like the author and everyone put so much into it that for me just to ace it out is unfair to them. I know that sounds weird.
I mean, no, that's the most fair way to approach these things.
Because I think there's an audience out there, everyone knows about it. Just because I didn't get it, why didn't I get it?
And that's why, I'm of the thing where it's if the first chapter had me interested, I'm in it for the whole book.
Yeah.
Because it's that's what they were supposed to do. And also, a book is more one person's creative vision.
Yes.
So for a movie, when a movie's bad, I'm well, so many things happen to make this bad.
Yes.
That it's not even anyone's fault. But if a book is
right.
bad, it's okay, so their entire work that they did this was wrong.
Yeah. And sometimes it's years, or sometimes it's a long time.
It's really different to say this book was bad.
Right.
As opposed to a movie, because it's well, I don't know, maybe the director didn't get the actors right. The actors nailed it, but yeah.
And I do that with movies a lot. I think I've mentioned it to you guys before, where I'll watch a movie a ton of times, and I know a lot of people do, but other times that I watch it, I'm specifically looking for other things. So okay, I'll watch Endgame, and I've watched it probably 14, 15 times, but most of the time now when I'm watching it for something totally different. I want to see the interactions behind the scenes. I want to see, more personal aspects of it. And it, believe it or not, I'm telling you, you get a different view of it because you're like, oh, I didn't even realize that. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's that. I don't want to get too off topic. It is that thing where they play different music over that ending scene in Infinity War with Thanos.
Yeah.
And I literally, your brain just notices different things. When they play a happy song, I notice the sunset more. When they play a sad song, I notice his facial expressions more.
Right.
But yeah, this was I remember I saw this way when I was in high school.
Yeah, and I tried to get the movie, but I couldn't.
Yeah, it was on Netflix, and Netflix. Yeah. I mean, there's so many things that I found on Netflix that are just gone now, and I recommend to people, and I can't find them. Well, I guess never mind.
Surprising cast.
Yeah,
yeah,
they
really,
did. They
really
managed
surprising
to get
cast. For that type of movie, not type, but
It was the director was he's a horror director, and it was and the author mentions it's crazy that he got a movie at all because he's not a huge name.
Yeah, and the movie itself.
Yeah,
I mean
they got a lot of stuff right. The movie just skipped some parts of the story, and the only thing I'm upset about is they skipped the ending.
Yeah, and I mean we're talking about the book, but in the movie, from what I get from the pieces I see, compared to reading the book, very Evil Dead kind of feel to it.
Yeah. It's definitely a lot lighter. Especially with the protagonist. He's more enjoyable for people.
Yes.
Because I think the only time I got into an intense argument with this friend I have, and she's into books too, so we'll talk, and she's I hate the protagonist. And I was but the point is that he's not good. And I'm really, that was the most intense argument I've had about a book was yeah, but that's the whole thing is, he does suck.
Yes. And that's the whole thing of lots of times, even though the character comes across like that, they still make you care about the character.
Yeah. And I like it when a protagonist does something that I don't agree with because it helps me it clicks a thing in my brain that this is another being than a self-insert.
Yes. Yeah. But I think the book was great. Like I said, took me 3 times to really. Second time was good. I got into it. Third time, I enjoyed it a lot more because then my mind was looking for different things because I already knew what was going to happen. So now I'm not focused in on what's going to happen. I'm focusing on what is happening behind the scenes or what's happening other times. So
and this author, and it happens more as the books go on. The 4th one's coming out in November, I think.
yeah,
But definitely like the way these books end, it is like, oh, if you re-listen to it, you'll notice a lot of plot points.
yeah. Now, did the bartender in Deadpool?
Yeah.
Is that the voice?
No.
It sounds just like him. His friend.
I can hear that. Yeah. Oh, John?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it sounds just like him.
Yeah, I'm that scene where he's like pointing and
Yeah.
like,
Have I died yet?
yeah.
I mean, it sounds just like I thought it was the actor. I'm like, wow, how'd they get this guy?
That's happening. I thought the voice actor for The Way of Kings was the voice actor for Gareth
Oh, wow.
from Mass Effect. I was like, oh, it's him. That's
Yeah.
so cool. And then I looked at it like, oh, he's
him.
using a pseudonym for the audiobooks. I was like,
Sideward Dog.
this is one of my favorite. It was one of my favorite movies for a long time. And then
When did you read the book?
when I started working in a warehouse and I found out that it had a book at all.
Oh, good.
So it was really recent, and then I was like, this is like way deeper and more complex than the movie is.
Yeah.
And a lot of the things I like about this series are in like the later books, but like I really like its way of handling like a mystery and the whole thing where he's telling the story to someone, and that's the setup for all of them.
Yeah.
He's telling the story and he's lying or he's making stuff up.
And he says that he's lying,
Yeah. And
but kind of lying.
he's
And-
like, I exaggerate something.
Yeah.
But that's the thing is it's like he's lying, but it's like about things, but like supernatural stuff is still happening.
Yeah.
And that's like the things I tell people to read the books for. It's all later because starting with the second book, you then get 3 different people's perspective, and you get a different thing from every character. So the main character,
Okay.
like he's pretty honest, but he's hiding a secret about himself that you find out at the end of the book.
Kind of like Dark Summer.
I didn't read that.
Oh, it's a series on you can watch it on Netflix.
Oh,
And it's a really cool zombie kind of show, and they'll take the perspectives of people. Like you'll see you're filming this couple running by a lady that just got hit by a car, and then they go on their way, and then it cuts to her story, the lady that got hit by the car, and it's like all these different perspectives. It's pretty neat. I like when they do that.
yeah. This one will do the main character. He can see supernatural things. He's hiding something, but he's pretty honest.
Yeah.
His friend is like very in tune with supernatural things, but he lies all the time.
Right.
And then his girlfriend, she's very honest, but she can't see supernatural things.
Right.
And she'll lie if it means protecting her boyfriend.
Right.
So at the end of every book, you go like,
Oh, that's cool.
they usually end on a note where you're like, oh, so like here's what was really happening. So when you go
Oh,
through
that's cool.
it's very mentally stimulating. It is.
Oh, that's cool.
Your brain just starts going like, so here's the real story you have to piece together from all of
Gotcha.
them, and it's very pleasant. In the first book, it's not that present, but it's there.
Right. Now, so everyone that maybe hasn't read this book or watched the movie, so in a synopsis of what it's about, it's about a character. What's his name?
David Wong.
David Wong, and he's being interviewed by a kind of reporter, kind of like Interview with a Vampire, but he's telling this story.
Yeah, Interview with a Reporter. How
There
about
you
that
go.
one?
And he's telling this story that has to do with like all these supernatural things. So it's not only our plane, but it's another existing dimension or plane. And how it all happens, and it's a roller coaster with stuff that goes on in this book, and it's stuff that because it's funny. There are a lot of parts that are funny, and so him and his friend John,
Who dies at the end?
dies at the end.
Spoilers.
Yeah, they're working through all these things that are happening in their town, and it's really enjoyable. like I said, for me, I had to listen to it a couple times. Doesn't mean that you would have to. I think lots of people would get it right off the bat. But it's really, it's funny in the way he thinks. And then to find out, well, we won't go there.
We'll get to the end. We'll have a spoiler mark because I think the ending, especially for people who only see the movie,
is
you miss that. Like, and also the beginning sets up that at the end.
Oh, yeah.
Like, he's asking this question for a reason.
Yeah.
So when the movie skips out, it's like, well, now that's just like a quirky thing.
Yeah.
But there was a very specific reason it opens on that. It's like his version of the ship of Theseus or whatever. I don't know how to pronounce that word.
I don't either. You're talking to the wrong guy.
Oh, okay. But yeah, the beginning, what do you think about that? Because the beginning is him asking you, like, his version of that, which is like you have a hammer or an axe that you use to slay a monster. You need to replace the handle, and then and then you need to replace the head. Is it the same axe?
Yeah, and what's crazy about that is the fact that once you get into the book and understand, I mean, they're dealing with different dimensions, and the thought processes are totally different.
Yeah.
And that's what the writer, I think, did, was what we assume, wood to be wood. We assume wall to be a wall. But in another dimension, it might not be that. So the thought processes of these individuals or these things coming through, or what you want to call a demon or whatever you want to call it, has totally different thought processes. And so they're, what you would seem ridiculous as a 20-foot chicken to them might be the thing to use to terrify you.
Yeah.
Not that there's a 25-foot chicken in here.
No, there's 25-foot like meat monsters or whatever.
Meat monsters.
Yeah,
and there's monsters made out of meat out of this guy's freezer, and it's got a turkey head.
Yeah, and it was haunting the wrong guy.
And it's haunting the wrong guy, and that's what I mean. It's some of those things are funny, but when you really kind of back off from it. Like I said, by the third time, it was great for me because I was looking at things like that. And you have, in the end, that would totally happen because these things don't know our world.
Yeah, they mess up.
They mess up.
They mentioned that there's ghosts that, like, they just had to, like, talk to him for, like, an hour to explain to him that he's dead and he needs to leave. And he's just like, oh. And you're like, boop, gone.
Yeah.
Like, it's because it's like, you don't see modern ghosts that often.
No.
So it's like someone who died now, like they should also know what ghosts are. So like they go into their mind, and the story is kicked off with an interdimensional drug, called soy sauce that lets you.
Yeah, they call it soy sauce, but that's the name that they call it, but they don't really know what it is.
Yeah, it's just a thing that some guy like found, and they don't even go too much into that. But they're just like, however he got it, it's here now.
Yeah,
and you can kind of see how like they could have been handed to him and stuff. And
it talks about it more towards the end of the book.
Yeah, and you do you see one of the ways it can be made too. And
and it's a drug that enhances your vision into these dimensions.
That is a great way of phrasing it.
Yeah. So if you wouldn't see Ghost, and then you take the soy sauce. Yes, you might see Ghost. And to the point where it's not only interdimensional, it's intertime too. So you'll be, it references in the book where he starts thinking he knows exactly when that car is going to break down. He knows exactly what's going to happen to that guy in 14 days.
Yeah, he knows that plate of rice has like 3,420 grains, and it was farmed by a guy whose nickname was Cooter, and he's like, but those are the side effects of the drug.
Those are the side effects.
The effect is you become a conduit into the world of magic or horror.
Yeah,
whatever.
and whatever. I don't even know what to phrase that.
Paranormal.
Yeah, or what we would see as paranormal.
Yeah.
Because to them, they're not paranormal, right? But it gets very, not creepy, but in some aspects, kind of creepy.
Yeah, and there's also one of the beings has like this ability to like retcon things, and like because it's time, so they can rewrite reality. And so like throughout the book, there'll be inconsistencies that someone will point out,
right?
Because because the guy's still on the drug, so he can see through time a little bit still, and he's like, you mentioned Todd, but there's no
Todd.
Yeah, and he's like, I think there was.
Yeah.
Which I think if they were gonna make it a TV series, which I think it would have to be for a story like this, in the trailers you would include a guy who is then not in the show.
Yeah, and I don't know if it would ever. I don't know if it would ever make a show. I would like it. I would like it, but it's kind of complex. It's like Quantum Leap meets, I can't even think of Logan's Run.
Oh.
And Blade Runner.
Yeah, and then each book adds it because his mood changes too, and when his mood changes, the genre changes. So when he's serious, you realize oh, this is a terrifying thing.
Right, but that totally makes sense.
Yeah,
I'm not going to spoil it, but it totally makes sense.
And
why
there is a point where the mood where it stops being so goofy, and he stops his narration stops being so sarcastic. And so when you rewatch it, you're like, oh, at that exact point, you know why.
Yeah. Yeah. So I mean, I think it's a really good book. Like I said, I'm getting to a point where, with both, watching stuff on YouTube, videos about the book, and also on the other thing, I'm to a point where I'm just kind of overloading. Because I'm listening so much.
Yeah, you've been saying you've been acquiring a lot of books, and you're like, oh, this one was 60 hours. I listened to that twice. I re-listened to this book 3 times to give it a fair chance. You gave it a fair chance at one.
I know. But with this book, I really enjoyed. Like I said, by the third time I listened to it, the first time, I just said, I couldn't follow the character in the beginning. He's very kind of slapstick in some of the things he's saying, and then it kind of goes away, and it's not as bad, and that was throwing me off. That
was the hard part, because I do book for books with a lot of people, so I listened to a book they did, and they were the character is acting this way and stuff, and I'm like, I can't tell you why that.
Totally agree. So
it's I'm like, that's part of the experience. I can't tell you why, but
Oh yeah, once you find out why, you're like, okay.
Yeah, and they're the characters spell it out for you more at the end and stuff, and you're and that's why this author's really good with time to go through the story, and now I know all these things.
And I love the fact that you have there's a guy that is selling the soy sauce.
Mm-hmm.
He's a Jamaican guy that has a fake accent, so he's not.
He's not.
You don't even know who he is.
Yeah, and he has an alias, which is Robert Marley.
Robert Marley, and he's giving this stuff to people, and it's it's funny because throughout the whole book, you're faced with characters like that. That when you listen to it the third time, you're like, huh, because now now you could spend time and pay attention to this guy. Where's this guy been?
Mm-hmm.
What's this guy been? And it's it's full of them. It's full of characters that are a mystery in some of that aspect.
The movie is a pretty good adaptation, and they even expanded on a scene. But because the point where I was oh, I love whatever this movie is, I'm for it, was the scene with Robert Marley where he's where he does his I'm gonna tell you the last dream you had, and I'm going to interpret the meaning for you. And up until that point, it's oh, this guy's sarcastic at a party. He doesn't want to be there. He's awkward. And he's mean and mean spirited about everything. And then he in the book he gets cut off in the middle of interpreting the dream. In the movie they let him keep going, and it's it's actually better.
Oh wow!
Because in the book he goes shut up, and he leaves. But in the movie he goes into but you got to think about this, and then he's oh,
that's kind of cool.
And because that is the point. And I've basically, with this book and movie, people either tell me they can't finish it, or they will call me as soon as it's done and be I had a friend who actually you have to watch this movie, and he was at 1 a.m. he called me, he's I just finished it, and it blew my mind.
Well, it's funny you say that, because that's why I think it was just a struggle first time I read it. It's just a struggle, right? But once you get through it and realize it, that's when I was just like you said, oh man. Now it probably been a way different if I would have watched the movie first then read the book.
Yeah, I think, because for me, I'm but that reveal isn't in the movie.
Oh, but it would have just been much better reading the book.
Yeah. So you still get that surprise if you go into the book. You're oh, this whole plot element I didn't know about.
Right.
But the movie version of him is closer to the version of him that you get at the end. That's more relatable and
Yeah.
like less like negative of a person.
Yeah, well, there's a reason.
Yeah, there is. And you're like, oh, like, so like for people who are like, oh, I can't get into this character because
Yeah.
of the way he is at the beginning, and I'm like, well, I can't tell you why.
Yeah. Now, if you like, Evil Dead, that whole series, dude, you'll love it. Mm-hmm. Doesn't have anything to do with zombies, or anything like that.
It's in the spirit of it.
But it's in the spirit of it. It
You
had that feel to it.
You can punch these monsters. You can get some
Right.
tools together. They like wrap a baseball bat in books
Yeah.
from the Bible.
Yeah.
They have testaments, which are mints with like quotes that they'll
Right.
like feed someone if they think they're like possessed.
Yeah. And it's weird because they never really get into that aspect and why that works.
Yeah,
because they don't really ever say that these are biblical demons or anything like that.
Yeah, they have like one little line about it, and it addresses the thing that I always have an issue with. Anytime there's anything like with demons in it, I'm like, okay, so like if demons are real, angels should be real too.
Yeah,
so there should be forces of good fighting here. And like the only thought he gives, and like part of it is like he doesn't put much thought into it. It is just like he doesn't know if holy things work on these monsters because humans believe in them or the
yes.
monsters do.
Right.
And it is like a thing of like the power of faith.
Yeah.
Is that like a human invention that like can like you could like concentrate that and actually like fight evil with it?
No, I agree. Yeah. So, but yeah, it's interesting and it's interesting how these guys, it's like they'll just go into it with these things. Mm-hmm. They'll just like expect a meat monster.
Yeah, and
you can't see it. That's the thing. Like if we had a artifact of a mutated chicken worm thing right on the table, you wouldn't be able to see it. I could see it because I have soy sauce, right? Cody could see it because he has soy sauce. And it's funny because how they do it in the book is all of us have been there. We're looking somewhere else, and through our peripheral vision, we see something. And we turn there, and there's nothing there. They do that a lot in the book. That's the other world. That's those things that you're seeing are real.
Yeah, and it's like if you're not if you get into the right mindset,
right?
And I really like that speech he gives to like get someone into the mindset of like to be able to see them like these creatures, which is like, do you remember that?
Yes.
You would do a better delivery than I would if you remember the words, but
I don't remember the words.
It was just like because he's like the guy's like I don't see anything, like you're crazy, and grabs me and goes, you're gonna die someday. At an actual point in the future, you're going to die. It is unavoidable. It is physically impossible to avoid it.
Right.
At some point, you will die and either experience complete oblivion or something that we can't even comprehend. And he's like, and now without moving your head, look over. And then he like freaks out.
Right. But he had saw. Well, then again, he saw the stuff, and then it totally makes sense.
He just says like, oh, you did that pretty quick, actually.
Right. And then yeah. There's a lot of spoiler stuff in there. But
I mean, it's a mystery thriller, and that's the hard part about talking about something that reveals are cool.
Right.
But there's a lot more going on, and they take more advantage of that later. But
yeah, and stuff that would be visually, I didn't see the movie, but stuff that would be visually like crazy. In the movie, did they go through the whole trailer that's painted?
No. See, the movie just
it would be insane.
Yeah, because there's like paint, and especially because the character and the book is way scarier. The movie is not a horror, but the book does get genuinely disturbing. Where he'll see a painting, and he's like, "There's a clown that's like eating its own intestines," and it's like when he looks in its eyes, he can see that it's like terrified, and it's like it starts like moving, and he can like I get that like he can like feel that someone's making him do this.
Yeah, he walks into this trailer, and the whole from mid on is painted like the outside of the trailer, even down to the lamp, the glasses, and it's all this painting. And that's where he sees the clown, and he sees a deer, and at first it's like beautiful, and he's looking at this deer, and then when he's getting closer, all this crazy crap's going on, and those things. It's a mind. It's a mind f.
Yeah, and there was definitely like one moment in it where I was like, this is like horrifying, where he is just sitting there, and he is being haunted, and like he's being told like, you're going to die alone with stuff in your pants, and I was like, this is a prophecy, this is not a threat. Like, you are going to die.
Oh, yeah.
And he's just sitting there, and he's like, leave me alone. And he's like, if you want to be
Yeah.
alone, you will be. You'll be alone forever soon. And it was just like, it was like, oh my God, this was not in the movie at all. I was not ready for that. It's a comedy because he's coping when he's retelling someone. And as he stops doing those things, you're like, what actually happened is you find out his background, and it's like, not in the movie at all, by the way.
Really?
They cut out Vegas completely.
What?
The movie cuts out them going to Vegas. It cuts out
That's one of the most important parts.
his entire bonding with Amy.
Wow.
Like that whole thing where they're in their car and they're talking about that's gone. Which I thought this was a good way of adapting it, which was they replaced who do they say the girl is, like J-Lo?
Oh, J-Lo is his friend, but not
Yeah.
the actual J-Lo.
They just make her Amy.
I got you.
Which was like, for a movie structure that works, just why it's like it would have to be a TV show if you were gonna do it right. But like, you know, that I thought that was like a good way of handling that.
Yeah, and it's really smart how the writer, dude, does great. Like, all the characters, or not all of them, but some of them have names of famous people, just like we do. Mm-hmm. Oh, that's you know, Brad Pitt over there.
Yeah,
Same thing. So he has a J-Lo, but not the J-Lo from the music.
not your Jennifer Lopez.
Right, his. And so, you know, later on in the book, he stops telling you that it's not J-Lo. So sometimes you forget and you're like, what?
Yeah, like
what the cop's name.
The cop is Morgan Freeman.
Morgan Freeman. And I'm like, Morgan Freeman?
Which is because he's just, and he'll say his like real name later.
Yes.
But because he's telling the guy, so he's like, I don't just imagine Morgan Freeman.
Yes.
Imagine Jennifer Lopez.
I thought that was great. I thought that was really, it was a really cool part of the book.
Yeah. All the emotional horror stuff, most of it is out of the movie.
Oh, wow.
Like the fact that, like, you know, like you're like, oh, that's what happened to him in high school and that's why he acts this way.
Oh, they took all that out.
Which is like, I mean, that's definitely not like general audience friendly. Cause
No.
like, and that's like really horrible stuff happens. And the line of like, where they ask like what they do to you. And he says, let me put it this way. I will never tell you.
Yeah.
And it's like, that's like a real thing with him.
Well, and also what he did to him.
And you're like, oh yeah, this is not.
And had no remorse.
No, and you're like, he laughed. And he's like, did you feel bad? He's like, of course. He's like, I lied. I didn't feel anything.
I know, that's crazy.
And because he got revenge on a bully in a very like
brutal way.
Yeah, and which I'm like, you know, good for him.
Yeah.
But and he talks about, and this is where like people, I can see them having an issue like with him as a protagonist. Because he's like, when I heard about Columbine, I was like, good. I just imagined everybody who bullied me getting shot, which is like not what happened in Columbine.
Yeah.
They made that up, that they were like bullied. But
in the end, for the character aspect of it, not that you get it, but you kind of get it.
You're like, that's why he's this way.
Yeah.
And you know, you get like a little more,
Yeah.
even more stuff with him. But it's a much more emotional, tragic story.
Yeah.
Than I thought going in. Even even when I tell people about it, I always forget about how like scary and sad it can get.
Yeah. Yeah, but all the other stuff makes up for it.
Because I mostly remember the hot dog that he uses as like a psychic telephone.
It's a bratwurst. Well,
Bratwurst.
Yeah, so what happens is he ends up, which is kind of crazy about this book. So picture they're in a police station, and him and John are in this police station. And John's in another interrogating room. He's in one. And there's this crazy cop there with a mustache. And so his phone rings. He picks up the phone, and it's John. And John tells him, hey, you need to get out of there. Am I dead yet? Because they came in and told him that John had died.
Yeah, and earlier John was like, when he first, something happened in the beginning, he's like, I must have called you like 30 times. You're going to be getting phone calls from me for the next 4 years, which has a massive payoff later in the series.
Yeah, and that's what I mean about the time aspect of it.
Yeah.
Because he tells him, you know, his phone breaks, and then he talks to him through a bratwurst and tells him to listen to the bratwurst and hold it up to his head, and he can hear him, and he can hear him. They branch through time and space. It's crazy.
Yeah, and because he's like, "Am I dead yet? You know, when are you getting this phone call? I don't know." Because he's been calling him through time.
But to him to say, "Have I died yet?"
Yeah.
So he already knew he's dead.
Yeah.
But where is he?
Because they're like, "Oh, he's just gone."
Yeah, it's crazy. It's real. That part of it is it's mind blowing. Because see, when I read a book or I look at things or I watch a movie or whatever like that, I think outside of that, right? So I take whatever that writer's thinking and I expand on it. I know that sounds weird, but
no, that sounds like a very. That's how you're supposed to approach things.
So I start looking at it at different levels, and I'm like, holy crow, man, that would be nuts.
Yeah, you're also way better at visualizing things than I am. If I didn't see the movie, I would have been lost.
Oh, well, I had to listen to it 3 times, but
to prep for this, I have to look up people do draw the spiders that aren't connected in the middle, but they they follow each other in a mustache monster, and the movie did do a good job when he takes the soy sauce.
Really?
Because when he takes it for the second time, and the floor explodes around him.
Oh, that's cool.
And it's just stars and galaxies, and he's you see him shift through different dimensions and areas.
Yeah, it's. I think they did a good job in the book. I mean, looking at it now, I think they did a phenomenal job. And like I said from the very beginning. If you're going to approach to listen to this book or read this book, just hang with it. Just hang with it. I know it gets weird and you start going, what? And then you'll even want to be like, this is making no sense. I mean, because it almost feels like the writer got lazy and shifts to one direction in one part and then shifts to another direction. That's so different. And you're like, this is stupid. This guy doesn't know what he's doing. Mm-hmm. But then in the end, it answers it all. Yeah. And then you go, oh, that's why.
Yeah. Which just sucks because it's
I know.
That's part of the experience is even knowing that there was an answer to that.
But I would highly recommend reading it a second time. I know that sounds crazy, but once you find out, read it for a second time, you're going to enjoy it more.
Yeah. And this is every book I would listen to it as soon as I finished. I would listen to it again because I'm like, oh,
right.
This is what was happening. And then
then you start getting the nuances of what's happening.
It adds to it because in the second book, if you re-listen to the first one, you're like, oh, that's what that was. And by the third one, they give you a thing that if you go through again, you're like, yep. Oh, yeah. Because there's so many little things where you're a character will be like, oh, when this guy gets here, you're in trouble. And you're like, but whenever they I don't think they're a threat. And you're like. Yeah. Oh, there's a reason because people are lying. Some people are lying. Some people are hiding something. Yeah. So, if you notice the way people talk is inconsistent, there's a reason for that.
Yeah, and it's kind of like in Fallout. And I was telling you, zombie Fallout, where it's so freaking cool to do that. I do that in my art. So I might have a piece of art that has a poster of the hip joint. Another place, right? So then I have the hip joint actual piece. And the way I look at it is the person that buys that first piece might never even know what the hip joint is. But imagine when you do. That's why I do it. Because when they do it, then it gives it all back to you.
And it's rewarding the fan.
You're like, that's what that's all about.
Yeah.
And I think that's so cool. I like when it happens to me. So I try to do the same in my art.
Well, yeah, it is one of the most mentally stimulating feelings where I'm like, oh, that's I just feel it in the back of my head as this burst. I'm like, oh, I'm piecing everything together.
Yep. And that's how I felt with this book, though. Once I kind of got it, and I'm like, okay, I get what's going on. Like I said, by the third time, I was really rolling. I was enjoying every minute of it because I understood it now, and I'm like, okay, that makes sense. And I was more apt to see the changes that the writer did. So I was more apt to go, there it is. That's exactly the time that it happened.
Yeah.
It was cool.
Yeah, and it is called John Dies at the End, which I guess, did you see Rango?
Rango.
with the lizard version of Fear and Loathing?
I did not.
Oh, well, it starts where they say the hero dies in the end.
Oh.
And they do like a joke at the end. They do a thing with it that I thought was nice. And I think they did a similar thing with that title. But, I mean, midway through the book, he's told, like, your friend John is dead. And then he gets a phone call from him that says, am I dead yet?
Yeah.
And the plot is all them, like, figuring out what even is going on. Because as soon as he takes
or what even death is.
Yeah. That's a good one. He's being visited by people. He doesn't know what's. He's also in the movie. He's like the only person being affected. But in the book, there's like a bunch of.
Oh,
people.
there's a bunch.
And
of
some
people.
people are just like, no, I'm done. I'm out.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, I didn't. That is cool. That like, because like he's like, his friend John is like the crazy one, the one who's doing all the drugs and stuff. And he's like, we can get paid to get a ghost that's out of here rid of.
Like
and
Ghostbusters.
Yeah, they get like kind of famous for it.
Yeah.
So like there's a blood stain on the carpet that keeps filling, and like when they get there, they just see a ghost. They're like, leave, get out of here, go. And people are like, oh my god, like you've done it. Or like they do a thing where like a guy like is convinced that like he like sees like spiders everywhere.
Yeah.
And when he tells them that, like, when they tell him, like, we can see them, you are being haunted by spiders, he just goes, like, oh, good, I thought I was crazy. And they don't even take care of the issue. Like, that was it. Like, they were talking about, like, he just wanted to know if he was wrong or not. Yeah. But, like, he got his, like, that was it. Like, he was like, no, you're being haunted by spiders. He's like, oh, okay. And now I can move on.
And it's crazy because it's like, you're looking at it in some aspects, these people see things, and it's not a physical thing. But then I keep on thinking back to the beginning when he sees the cop and doesn't see him in the mirror and he's a ghost and he goes, well, he can't hurt me. No, he can hurt you.
Yeah.
I thought that was such a great line. No, he can hurt you.
Yeah.
That was great. It was great. So, I mean, and he leaves a lot of that mystery, I think. I think that, well, in the end, I was like, well, what else? It could be anything.
Yeah, and it gets more and more scary.
Yeah.
And there's a reason for that.
Yeah.
But you are like, what's this all building up? And by the end, the guy he's interviewing starts like the voice actor did a good job like capturing that little fear in his voice.
Yeah.
Where he's like, where are we going? And
well, because he originally didn't believe it, which is kind of crazy.
Yeah. Because he's like, that was some trick of the mind you did on me.
Yeah.
He's like, I can, if you pull, you have like 5 pennies in your pocket. If you flip them 10 times, they'll land heads, tails. So he's like, I'm not gonna do that. So you're like, but then he's like, well, then why are you here?
Yeah.
If you don't believe me and you're making fun of me for this, like, what's actually? So there's always like something going on.
But he had his suspicions why he was there.
Yeah.
Well, we'll get there.
Yeah. There is this
book is hard to do without spoiling it.
Yeah. So once we cover like everything that can be without spoilers, we'll have a little thing that's going to tell you.
Yeah.
It's going to be spoilers because there's like half of the conversation is the spoiler.
Yeah, and we're like dancing around right now.
Yeah.
But in the end, realistically, it's a good book. It's got humor. It's got kind of mystery, horror. It's like I said, if you like, what's that guy's name? Dash?
David Wong.
No, the guy from Evil Dead.
Oh, Ash.
It's Ash. If you're an Ash fan or you like that type of stuff, this book is right down your alley. Mm-hmm. I mean, right down your alley. Because yes, I think so.
Yeah, I think it's just like a Ash Evil Dead in like a teenager small town thing.
Yeah, with a little Einstein mixed in.
Oh yeah, actually yeah.
Yeah, a little, yeah, because it deals with different dimensions and things like that.
And it is really fun. And, as the series goes on, they do it more and more. But they'll bring up, like, interesting topics that they'll essentially, like, talk about, like, like, and in this one, it's a lot of, like, the ship of theft or whatever.
Yeah.
And then later on, they talk about Dunbar's number and your neofrontal cortex and, like, all these things that, like, these, like, real phenomenons.
Right.
And they'll talk about, what is people's obsession with death? What is people's obsession with this thing? Why does this thing pop up in our minds when we think about it? Like,
and he did a great job of blending that into his world.
Mm-hmm. It's natural when people when it comes up, people are actually talking about it.
Right. Yeah.
It's not someone like it is like, what does this mean? What is like? Why is this relevant to it?
Right.
We want to jump into the.
I think we do.
Okay, so this is going to be the end of the spoiler-free section.
End of the spoiler-free.
And so this is for the movie fans who want to know what story was actually happening the whole time. Because it is a pretty cool setup for adaptions too. The story where he's telling someone it, so it's like,
Yes.
well, in the movie he's not telling him these parts. I guess you can like
Yes.
view it as.
Yes.
So it's called John Dies at the end, and this is your last chance for spoilers. But it should be called David Died. Roughly halfway through the story.
No, it's so right. So right.
And this is for people who want to hear that discussion.
Yeah.
really.
So now we're talking to the individuals that have read the book, seen the movie, and we won't go into that part of it. So if you still are listening and you want to go read the book, definitely go read the book and then watch this again.
Yeah.
Do we wait a couple minutes till they leave?
They should be. Well, first of all, they're never. No one would ever click out of a video.
That's
we have.
true. Pause it.
Never. Yeah. Always keep the tab open.
There
Don't
you
click
go.
out.
There you go. All right, let's roll.
Well, that guy's getting coffee.
Oh, creamer?
Was it almond milk? Nice.
Oh.
So yeah, this was the thing where when I was getting into a heated conversation with a person who was like, I don't like the protagonist, and I was like, okay, so you're not gonna read it. Like, no, okay, they're dead. They died.
I know.
And they were replaced, and it was like a really, and also like up until then, you get like a little more window into his mind where like he gets possessed, and when you get into his mind where he starts like looking at that girl, it was like genuinely like disturbing. Where he's like, get the gun, then take her away somewhere private, and it is like, oh, this guy is like messed up.
Yeah.
And they mention it's like the Venom principle. Which is, I'm going to make that up as a term. But the whole thing with Venom is supposed to be, it can't make you do anything you don't want to do. So, like, Venom can't make you be a killer. If you wanted to kill someone, he can make you, like...
Enhance your killing ability.
Yeah, but he can't... the symbiote can't make you into a psychopathic killer.
You have to be one.
Yeah, so the demons work under the same rule, which is, if it's a good person, they, like, die. If they possess like a true believer, they die because there's nothing for them to like feed on. But if you're if you're like a bad person, or if you're a person who has like darker thoughts, it can amplify them. And you find out that the protagonist, he has like very dark thoughts that demons are able to like amplify.
Well, it doesn't change what happened in his past.
No. And, there might be a reason that he has a mindset like that because a very brutal thing happened to him.
And everyone that's read it knows.
Yes, he was assaulted.
Yeah.
And he talks about like
why do you say when he was assaulted I hear like ice cream music? Is that your phone?
No, every time I say the word assaulted, I get like a little notification.
All right.
I have like 10 alarms on my phone. I keep forgetting those. I like have my day like regulated by alarms.
So do I. I have 6 just to get in the morning. But yeah, so I mean, we're already talking to people that have already seen it.
Yeah,
so everyone knows that he's already been replaced.
Yeah, but yeah, he was because the last scene with him was this like demon made out of cockroaches, like
yes,
and he's like sitting alone, and the TV is made out of static, and it's like talking to him and haunting him, and it is like horrifying, and it says like you're going to die alone, and he does,
and he did,
and like it really was a thing of like these are very like. Basically, they went to Vegas and they were able to thwart like a scheme they had, and they were like, "For that, we're going to kill you."
Yeah,
and they do, and it was like, "This is not something you can just like easily fight off."
Yeah, because when it opens up and you find out that it's kind of like an invasion plan.
Yeah,
and you're like, and that's not the only people out there. Yeah, you start thinking of multiverses and all that stuff. You start thinking, "Geez Louise." That's where it really got insane, and the turnout that he is a replacement.
Mm-hmm. And yeah.
And he doesn't even kind of know it. He kind of figures it out, but he doesn't really know it.
And there's a little thing where like because he meets a character who is being swapped out of this dimension by like a copy, or like attempts at a copy, which is like a bag of meat, and it's like it was like comedy. But then like he mentions that like he has like random like he'll like forget like 4 months of memory.
Right. Yeah, because then he goes, "Oh, you probably forgot."
When John his friend's like, "Yeah, you do."
We don't hang out that much anymore, bro.
Yeah, which is like a thing later on, because he's like, his first thought is, "I got to call my friend."
Yeah.
But then his friend's like, "Oh, I'm talking to the one that is different, who doesn't remember because you're acting very differently." And like way later, he is like, the other one wouldn't have done something that nice, and it is like he wouldn't have cared, and it's like. Those are the hints already,
and they were gonna kill him.
Yeah,
and you know, and then it makes sense because he's so afraid to be on his own because he doesn't know if he's going to kill somebody because it's not him.
Yeah, because he sees there's like a body in the shed, and he's
Right.
like, I killed somebody. Who'd I kill? He thinks like they have to like track down this
Right.
girl because they made a deal to like watch after her, and they went to like a special ed class together.
Which makes sense why he blacked out when she blacked out. And you see, it starts.
I didn't even make that connection.
And then because he's supposed to be watching Amy, and at the same time that he just falls asleep, and she blacks out and does whatever, and he's like, oh my gosh, I couldn't even keep her safe. And like I said, by the third time, you're like, oh yeah, because you're not you, dude. You're an invader.
Mm-hmm.
You're in on the scheme.
There's a lot of cool stuff they do. There's
Really
another
cool.
character, Roger North. It's like when he first like has the drug, like it like you know it like forces itself with a needle into him,
Oh yeah.
which has its own symbolism maybe.
Yeah.
But and it it does like the speech I really like, where he's just like, oh, interesting. Did you know that like you ever think about why you'll see a single shoe on the road, or
Yes, I remember
when
that.
you hear a word for the first time, you'll hear it again
Yeah.
the next like within 24 hours. Do you think bees know that you harvest them, or do they think they're doing it of their own free? Which was the reason he's asking that.
Yep.
And he like feeds him like this like spider, and you're like, why do you do that? Like you find out that like that's kind of like what freed him from like his programming.
Yeah.
And like stuff like that. Like that scene was just perfectly done in the movie.
Oh, that's great.
Roger like his character, you don't get the finale of it, but like the guy who played him did a great job too.
Oh, that's cool.
I think it's the guy who played Abe Sapien.
Oh, is it?
It's like
I've never seen the movie yet.
It's a very tall, gaunt guy, and he did a great job. So like you throughout the movie, it's like why was he fed this spider? It's like, well, because this place uses biotechnology,
Right.
And he's like, I'm gonna free you from like this thing that's gonna turn you into, because like he'll like run into a cop who like now they're turning into a monster,
Yeah.
and they've already been replaced.
And it's funny because some of these things are so stupid too. Mm-hmm. That's what's so funny about it. So yeah.
They talk where they're fighting and they shoot a deer and ammo comes out, and the interview is like, okay, now you're going too far. But he's like, no, but like that could have been like the other guy fighting because he took the drug too. He could have been doing. He also could have been making it up, but he was like you can like fight back a little if you're under the effects of the drug.
Yeah.
And a lot of people who took the drug basically they get marked because you become a conduit.
Right.
So they're like,
At least we didn't see assault.
yeah.
Well, what's crazy about it too is you have what's crazy about it is that in the end the reporter is one.
Yeah.
And it's like imagine if you felt like yourself and you're talking to somebody and they're like, dude, describe yourself.
That was a very, very cool moment because
that was freaking awesome, dude.
Because you get a little bit of that before, where like in the very beginning with the meat monster, which is an example of the goofy stuff still isn't completely jokey, because they're like hired by this girl to like, I'm being haunted by my boyfriend who like hits me, and they do all this like wacky goofy stuff, but then they're talking. She's cute, right? She's blonde. He's like, she's not blonde.
Right.
And they're like, can you describe yourself? And and like it just happens. So like,
yeah,
and so he's talking in interviews like you realize he's like, describe yourself. And the guy's like, no.
But what's weird is why they take on with him. It took on his form, but in other characters it doesn't.
Yeah, it took on they'll take on the.
They'll
form.
see what you want to see.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So like, unless you like double check.
Yeah.
Like you won't think about it because he's like, no, I just figured.
Yeah, you didn't never seen the guy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he says like, my first thought when I saw him was he looks exactly like how I thought I would. And he's like,
yeah,
if I wasn't under the effects of the drug, I probably would have picked up on that.
Which then you don't, not to put too much into a writer, because I've always talked about that, but it's almost like he's taken things that normally happens. Because that's happened to me. Oh, dude, you totally sound like you.
Yeah.
Totally what I would think you would sound. Now every time I'm going to say that, I'm like, frick. Maybe he's been taken over. No, I loved it. And like I said, reading it was very slow because you didn't really get a lot of that. And then when it starts unveiling itself, you're like, oh, crap.
Yeah.
I got to start this over.
And because he's under the effects of the drug, when he's telling the story at first, he's telling his other version's memories of them.
Yes.
But he's able to get into the mind of him, and that's why in the beginning he has all those like, and he'll mention like, oh yeah, I was like an asshole, and you're like, or jerk. I might actually bleep that out just for the sake of it.
Just bleep it.
Yeah. But he is like, if you notice, he is like very negative about himself.
Yes.
Before he crosses that threshold, because he's like very bitter about the person he,
killed.
was supposed to be.
Well, he killed himself.
Yeah. He killed himself.
Yeah. And when and it's funny because you don't even know that until they go into the shed, and then you're like, holy crap.
And that was such a great moment to like everything about that, where he starts like, because like he's like Amy like gets there first and she's just like crying like, I'm sorry. And he's like, no, like you're not dead, like we did it, we saved the day. And he's like, I see my body. And they take off the shoes and like it doesn't have the mark that they have.
Yeah.
And he goes to take, and it's like the mark is always on like their left foot, so he goes to take his right shoe off and he's like, I know which foot it, and then, he like sees it, he just like starts laughing and like crying. And
even the whole part where he almost purposely keeps on forgetting that he has a body in the shed.
Yeah.
It goes on for a long time. Oh, I forgot I had that body in that shed. Because he knows it's him.
Mm-hmm. And
he doesn't want to confront it.
And like after that, you get more moments with John too, where you like, because it's from his perspective, it's mostly seen as a wacky friend.
Yeah.
But when the reveal happens and like everything's serious now, because he's no longer like trying to like play it up for entertainment, like you see that John, like, and he mentions too, he's like, John took an almost like defensive position in front of Amy.
Yeah.
And you see that John, like, because John knew.
Oh yeah.
And he's like, he mentions that like it's passively mentioned from his perspective, but you see like in the story, like John like pushes Amy to the side.
Yeah.
And like puts him in front of her, like, while David like realizes all these things, and like he's like sizing him up and like seeing if he can like take him.
Yeah.
And it was
cool. And it was cool to see that from that character, right? Because that character was, like I said, the guy was always fucking around. Oops,
Yeah.
I bleeped that out.
we got 2 bleeps.
Sorry. The guy that was messing around, he was always kind of like that pothead surfer dude through the book.
But that's from David's perspective,
Right.
So when you see that a very serious thing is happening, and it's like, and that's part of like David's character is he doesn't talk. He talks about it once with like John never describes you as like the girl with like only one hand. He's like,
yes.
he's like you're like, oh, that's like a very nice touch. That he is like he is a good person. But it is, you don't, and they mentioned that like, they made a deal that if this guy dies, they'll look after his sister, they'll do all these things. And just in the background, John is doing all that. David didn't, because he's he was a selfish.
Oh my gosh, you're right.
So like, in the background, John, and there's like an excerpt from like a script that like this guy wrote that he like got published, and they mentioned like there's a rumor that this guy didn't actually die because that was his final wish. So John is like doing everyone's dying wishes and everything because he's actually like a better person than Dave.
Right.
But Dave's not there with him, so like.
Right. No, it takes on so many different facets.
Yeah, and the part of it is David doesn't even think about it, because like David did, like, they buried his body and he went to go show the reporter his own body, and he is like, what are they gonna do, charge me for like murder?
Suicide?
I killed, like, what are they gonna do? They can't charge me. I don't care if they find the body or not. But John's just there, and he's like, oh, I visit here every now and then. He's like, oh, you do that? That's weird. He doesn't think that John visits the body of his friend every now and then.
Right, because you're like, not my friend, dude. You're a clone. You're a.
That was my friend. I knew him for years. Like, we're friends now, but you were not my best friend. Like, he was.
Yeah.
And the narrator doesn't think about any of that. He's like, oh, that's weird. John was there, and he moves on.
Yeah.
And it's just that little bit of like, there's a deeper story always happening in it.
That's a good way to put it. There's always something else happening, and you got to kind of deep dive with this book. You got to constantly, not constantly be aware of what's going on, but constantly kind of be aware of what's going on, because then when it starts unveiling itself, and unfortunately it waits till the very end, and
because I mean the enjoyable part is way at the end.
Yeah, and that part's great, but then it makes you think, oh man, I didn't even give this book a chance. Halfway through it, it was just, I was about to put it down like the movie Punchline. I mean, and then in the end, you're like, oh, holy moly.
Yeah, there was this whole plot happening.
Well, they all know about it.
We just didn't get to it.
We just didn't get to it. Yeah. And even the whole guy that wants to change the world and rule it. What was the main guy's name?
Korok.
And it turns out to be this little brat kid.
Yeah.
Dude. That was freaking awesome, dude.
Yeah. And I like, too, that he mentions that, like, people manifest him in their reality. So, like, he is like a Cthulhu, Lovecraft, monster. Yeah. But in a universe where they did biotech, they, like, they're like, oh, we're gonna create a organic supercomputer, and he's like, and that just made me. And they mention he's the son of like another god, and he acts like a bratty kid, and that's why when you go through like all the silly things that were happening,
that's exactly what I'm talking about.
And it's like, and one of the ways they haunt is like making like songs like racist parodies and stuff,
right?
And he mentions too, it wasn't even like well done, like it barely rhymed.
And T-shirts, and he sees T-shirts that say all sorts of stuff,
and like the paintings, and like a lot of the ways he's being haunted is because he's being haunted by like a 13-year-old elder god.
Yeah.
And
and that was kind of his demise too. Mm-hmm. But it was it was cool because it actually, I mean, it opens it up to tons of content. Because I mean, even at the end of the book when they talk about the black hole, when they're the portal, when they're playing basketball, I mean, it's a totally different timeline. Mm-hmm. Same Earth, different timeline. Different things that have happened, and then to the fact that the young people go in there and come out 20 seconds later, like, hey, we saved the world.
Yeah, they mentioned like, oh, that guy and girl that were kind of like, sassy to each other, they're like holding hands now.
Yeah, and one of them made a comment, oh my gosh, just like we just left.
Yeah, and they're like, look, it's those same guys. Yeah, like, we saved the world, and
that's just insane. That's quantum physics, dude. Black holes, dude. That's.
And this was the thing I didn't notice until like I may have listened to this book like 10 times because every time I finish the next one, like I finish it, I'm like, I need to re-listen to it. And then I listen to the next one. I'm like, oh, that gives me a new context and I need to go through that one again.
Gotcha.
And let's like, also like Fred Durst is an angel in the book. That was the drummer from Incu. Yeah. And he mentions, I've been dogging you all.
But it's not really Fred Durst.
No, it's an angel that took the form of him.
Yes.
And by this time, David doesn't care anymore.
Yeah, he was in the truck.
But he makes a very important thing. A very specific thing happens. And I'm like, oh, because like they go to this other thing and they're trying to rescue Amy from being like replaced and stuff.
Right.
And then they do all this stuff and they kill like her copy, not the real. No,
right.
Roger North does. He kills like the copy that was going to destroy the world. And like when they get out, Fred Durst is like, the angel, he was like, there's other forces helping. You didn't know you were doing something, but you did it, and you have our thanks, and you'll have our help. And David's like, and this is before he discovers the big reveal that he's dead.
Yeah.
But he's talking to him, and it's like, if Amy died, he doesn't know Amy's also alive yet either.
Right.
And he's like, if you could rewrite reality to where you died instead of Amy, would you do it? And he goes, yes, of course I would. Yeah. He's like, really? Because you understand that like, the implications
this could happen.
of it. And so he goes, yes, do it. So like in the story where it's revealed that he died and Amy didn't, it's like, was that a deal that he just made with an angel to replace his death with hers?
Right. And being at the time, there's no timeline. Yes.
So it is like he just accidentally made a deal with an angel to like have himself killed. But like as a favor, they're like, but we'll rewrite reality too to where you still get to live, just not as you.
Yeah.
And they mention that like he's a way nicer person too.
Right. Yeah, it's really good. Like I said, and like I said before, for me it started off slow, but in the end, I definitely will probably look at the other ones.
Yeah, it's John dies at the end. This book is full of spiders. For the love of God, don't open it. And then the third one is what the hell did I just read? And the fourth one that's going to come out is called If You Can See This Book, You're in the Wrong Dimension.
Oh, that's too funny.
And what I like too is usually the title makes sense once you finish it. You think it's like a joke, but then like especially with this book is full of spiders. I was like, oh, that's being quirky, but like by the end I got like there's actually a deep reason it's called that. You like piece together when they actually start talking about quantum, like all these like moral things, the neofrontal cortex and what Dunbar's number is and how that's like shaped all of human society and why that's related to zombies because like it's this and this that we'll talk about in Book of Spiders. And when we get to that, let us know if you want to hear that. I think that's like every thing that I'm like, I really want to like hit those notes on.
Yeah, no, I totally get you. I mean, going back to another part that was interesting to me was, I mean, how you kind of, at least me, when the reporter finds out that he is one. Man, that was sad.
Because he's, I got a wife and kids. We're going on vacation next week.
That was just sad.
I got
man.
tickets.
But he thought that he was that guy.
And that was the cool thing too, because the question he asked, because I think he's starting to think about it, because he's like, you mean they can rewrite time? And he's like, what, can they go far back in time and like kill the person who invented penicillin? He's like, David's like, I don't know, like I don't know if it reaches that far. But he's asking that, and he's like, and you know, and then he goes like, no, let's do it. Let's expose them. They can't stop all of us. Like we can really like, we can show them that drug soy sauce. We can show everyone all these things. And you're like, in another timeline, he did, so they killed him back in time before he had that impact on them.
Yeah.
And because he mentioned, like, I used to have a cat, and you find out David was threatened by, like, the things where, like, we can kill Amy, like, at any point in time if you keep, like, interfering. So, like, the reporter, they killed his cat as a warning, but, I mean, he doesn't remember, and he was like, oh, let's really fight them. So, it's like, he made a big enough impact for them to kill him back in time.
That's crazy. Wow.
Because he was essentially the hero.
Yeah.
And that's the thing, is the reason David's alive is he doesn't interfere just enough that they don't view him as a thing that we have to, like, undo from reality.
Right. And they even say that.
Yeah.
They even say, you know, hey, we're doing this because you're, you know, out of control. Or
Yeah.
whatever.
So, like...
So at any time, they could do it. He even said it.
Yeah.
At any time, they could do whatever they want.
And I really like the romance between David and Amy, too.
I do, too.
I thought it was a...
I do, too, but then it's like, then it brings in a whole nother thing. You know, towards the end, it's all fabricated. It's not real.
Yeah, and they talk about that a little bit, which is like, you know, they knew each other, like, in grade school. And David, like, gave her, like, the nickname she got bullied for all about school. And you're like, oh, like, that's, like, your first hint that this guy was not, like, as nice as he, like, kind of thinks he is.
Yeah.
But then, like, John is talking to her, and she's, like, crying. And then, again, it's happening in the background while David is just, like, standing there thinking about it. And he, like, overhears it a little bit. But John's like, you never met David. You've only known this David. Like, every interaction you've had has been with this version of him. You got bullied by the real one.
Right.
And that was years ago. And, like, I really like that scene, too, where, like, John subtly is like, you know, he's like, Amy's going to stay with you tonight. I have to go. And then he sees, like, Amy, like, he goes into his and he's like, okay, when Amy leaves, I can just kill myself. And, he, like, goes in the medicine cabinet, and it's, like, empty. And, like, he sees, like, Amy kind of, like, walking away all fast. And he's like, where are my scissors? She's like, I don't know. And it's, like, very clear that his friend is setting up, like, a suicide watch thing for him. And
it's crazy because they know he's not him.
But
It's just so cool. Well, but it makes sense, though. They've only known that version. So if they've only known that version, then that's the guy. They probably like him more, which obviously they like him more than the original.
Yeah, he's a better friend. Because he mentions that, like, oh, yeah, once David got a girlfriend, he's like, yeah, you don't talk to me or hang out with me anymore.
Yeah.
And now he's like, he's like, that was still my friend, though, and he is still dead, and I still mourn him.
Right.
But, you know,
and it's weird because technically when he's doing the interview, he's already been dead.
Yes.
Yeah. So you get very little of him prior to that.
Yeah.
Halfway through.
The only time you see him is his new version of himself telling you his perspective.
Yes.
Which is, you don't realize that, and that's why his narration is even more cynical towards himself. It's not even self. It's like a version of self-loathing, but it's about that. He has all the memories of that, and he still has all the memories of being assaulted and you know, like taking joy in the death of someone when he like got back at them and all these things.
Yeah, it's great. I like I said, I really liked it. I know in the beginning it didn't seem like that, but that's how I was ramping it up.
Yeah. I mean, you give everything more than a fair shot.
Yeah, and sometimes that's my bad. But I figure if you put the time in and the hard work in, then at least I could finish it.
And what I like
about... Good, bad, or whatever.
This started as like a web blog.
Did it really?
Yeah, that got like a published later.
He's an intelligent guy.
His real name is Jason Pargin or something. The David Wong character is like it's the pseudonym.
Well, even he says in the book, I mean, he picks Wong because it's the most
common surname.
That's why John has John. It's the most common name.
Yeah, those aren't
So they
their
can't
real names.
find them.
The town is just called Undisclosed. I think in the
And
book
they always
it's in
do
brackets.
that.
Yeah.
And they always do that. They're like this, and then they go to the town undisclosed.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
They do a lot of unique little quirky things in there that I like, but it's funny because it seems slapstick, but there's some intelligence behind it.
Yeah. Yeah. There's also,
Except for the worm,
which one?
the big greasy one underneath the toilet.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Because I think I don't really remember if they really expanded on that.
Sometimes stuff just happens. Also,
Yeah,
sometimes there are just like loose demons or monsters that like get out that they have to fight.
Yeah, because I wanted to look. Second time I read it, I'm like, okay, let me see what the worm's about. And yeah,
and the whole thing. Yeah, it was a little upsetting that Robert North. I don't think it's Robert. In the movie, he's just like the part where he's like, "Oh, you're in here. Welcome." That's where he's out of the movie. You don't get the scene where he like saves the universe, or he like escapes and you see his true form. But if you watch the movie, the monster that they in the beginning when John calls him over and he's like, or John's like, "Oh, it almost killed you."
Yeah,
That's exactly how they describe Roger North looking when he transforms.
Oh wow,
Yeah.
interesting.
So I think he pretty much just like transformed and ran away. I'm like, I would have liked to see like how he just like ran off or.
Yeah, I think now I got to watch the movie, so I got to find it. I've already been on YouTube. They have all the clips from it, but they don't have the actual movie.
It'll be interesting if you read the book first, so you can get that perspective. But I feel like I would have been upset if I read the book first and I was like, oh, they cut out.
Yeah, I think in this aspect, I haven't seen the movie, but I could take it for what you're about to say, is that I would watch the movie first and then read the book.
Yeah.
Because I don't think I would have struggled as much.
Because you're given the groundwork and the plus side of it not adapting.
Yeah,
like,
that's better. Oh yeah,
you're still surprised by all of it.
Yeah.
You still get the reveal. You still get like all this. They keep the scene where the interviewer dies.
Yeah,
but that's where it ends.
Yeah, and it's weird because whenever you get in a book that has to do with, any kind of time travel, and there's no rules. People make whatever rules they want. Writers make whatever rules they want. And getting into things that he gets into, there are no rules. So whatever you do, in the end, in this book, makes sense. And it's all tied in with these tiny little threads that you start seeing, especially in the end. And it almost like he did a great job of making you want to read it again.
Mm-hmm. And
because what did I miss? Oh my gosh.
The third one is my favorite and it's like in the last paragraph. But someone just says one thing and it was seriously like, "Oh my God."
Yeah, that's awesome.
That gave a complete, like, the way people talk, the way people, like, mention things. If you go through it again, you're like, oh.
Yeah.
Why was there a gap here? Why do they say this? You're like, it was amazing.
So definitely, if you guys have read this book, definitely comment. Because I don't think that I'm off, but I could be. Because this book is crazy. There's probably things that I didn't even really get. And for me, if you tell me something interesting, I'll probably read it again.
The most important thing is they fight ghosts using 80s rock ballads.
Oh, that's the best.
Yeah.
That was the best.
And he just says it's probably because it's the closest thing to how it sounds in heaven. And so they play power ballad, which is like, they can't do that in the adaptation. But like... They like carry stereos that play like,
the weapons were really interesting. That was really cool.
Yeah, like I think they had like everything like had like a holy element of like a way,
yes.
like a really fun way of like is it like
well then the crazy
angelic
part,
punk?
Yeah, but then the crazy part was where he goes, "Yeah, we could do it with holy water, but where do you get holy water from?" That part I was like And it's funny, he just drops that and just moves on.
Yeah.
And you're like, well, you'd get it from a church. Why wouldn't he even think of that?
Yeah.
And would he think of that because of what he is? See, that's what I mean. So maybe the things that were being used didn't have any effect on him because it was more like you were saying, where it's their belief in it. But maybe holy water is a legit thing. That's why he says that he can't find it. Yeah,
Is he making up excuses?
That's what I mean. And he even says that in the beginning.
Yeah.
He says that, yeah, he's going to be lying. And so when you look at comments that are made in the very beginning like that, you start to go, wow, crap. And once you know, you start, like I said, second time listening to it, you're like, oh, that's why he said that. Because deep down he knows that he's not real.
Yeah. There is and it's like for comedy, and I really liked it, but there is like, oh, what? Because he mentions that like John went to go put a cross on him, but it like poked him in his eye.
Yes.
So he was like, like that got me. He's like, that proves it. But it's like, did he even lie about that part?
Yeah.
Did he lie about that it just hit his eye, or did it actually get him?
Or did he act like it hit his eye so he didn't get him?
Yeah.
That's what I mean. It's like, oh, it was so good. It was good. It was good.
Yeah, this is one of my favorites of all time. I recommend it.
It was really good. I don't know of my all time.
I don't think it'll be in yours.
And it's hard to say, but I definitely recommend it. But I would do those things first. You'll enjoy it more, at least in my opinion. You go find the movie, watch the movie, or even listening to us talk about it. You could be able to listen to it and enjoy it. Not that you wouldn't enjoy it before, you know what I mean?
But I mean, from what I can tell, a lot of people have an issue and there's no way to talk about it without because I don't like the protagonist, I don't like the sense of humor, and it is that is kind of part of the experience.
Yeah, so. And I think after listening to this podcast, I think you'll enjoy it a lot.
So, you recommend this?
Yeah, I totally recommend it to anyone that's listening. But like I said, I would highly. You'll enjoy it more, I think, if you've listened to this and then go ahead and listen to or read it or watch the movie. And I think it'll be more enjoyable.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I did the movie first, and that's why when they were going through the parts where the protagonist had was a really negative bad person, I was I was also picturing the guy from the movie because he nailed that character. Yeah. He did a great job. Of and the thing too of most of the characterization is his internal thoughts.
Yes.
So he does some of it's narration, some of it is just him showing you what he's thinking with acting.
Yeah.
So he did a great job. That's the tough part. Anytime I go through a book and I'm a lot of the story you're getting through people's thoughts. So it's so you can't just won't be there.
Yeah, it just won't be there. But I definitely recommend it.
I couldn't recommend it more.
We got to come up with a thumbs up or some kind of 5 pages.
You want to make it relevant to each book?
Oh, I like that.
5
steaks. No, I don't know.
5 soy sauce.
5 soy sauce.
Soy means something in Spanish, doesn't? Can we do something with that? Yo, soy sauce.
Yeah, I don't know.
No. Okay, what do you want? We'll
work on that.
Out of 5 soy sauces, what would you give it?
I would probably give it a 4.5.
4.5 is completely fair. I would give it a 5 just because I really like it, but yeah. I thought 4 is also fair.
Yep, 4.5. But I would definitely highly recommend it. And send in your questions and remarks to us. Definitely love to hear them.
Submit any book you want us to go through. Yep. If you can give us spoiler free. I try not to read synopsises when I go into a book because usually the premise is itself part of the experience, is figuring that out.
And if you're kind of getting how we do it, is we'll go through it a way where lots of times we're not spoiling it.
Yeah.
So we'll really kind of stay away from certain things. This one, it's hard not to have a spoiler on it.
And if you're gonna get into the series too, it's something that you need to know to understand, especially because it's on the surface without spoilers.
Yeah,
so this is one of those instances where it's very important to talk about the spoiler.
Yep, totally agree.
Usually we'll try to let you get an impression about it.
But definitely recommend it. Everyone respond. Tell us what you like, and I think that's it. That's the end of this
chapter. And we're going to work on that too.
We will.